Welcome to this Destination Staffordshire, section 2 of the Practical Marketing webinar. For those of you who are already aware of the Practical Marketing webinar, you're likely to have watched part 1 when we discussed the customer journey and how to define what you're selling. So in this part 2, Practical Marketing, we're going to be talking about who your customer is. Definition of who your customer is so important. For some of you who are established businesses, you might feel that you know exactly who your customer is, and it's something that you don't revisit very often. But actually revisiting, understanding how your customer fits into trends, into current economic situations, how things may have changed is really important. And it's also worth noting that it's new customer sectors, niches, emerge in your business. It might be that you've always relied on one particular kind of customer and that is changing, or you're not necessarily getting lots of new ones through. So it is really worth, at this point, taking the time to redefine who your customer is. What we covered in this webinar overall is the customer journey and understanding what you're selling and why, which was in part 1. In part 2, we're going to define your customers. So who are your customers? It's really important to begin to see your customers like a best friend. So traditionally, especially if we're in a new business or we're in an established business where we haven't thought about our customers too much, they've just kind of arrived, booked, and we've been happy with that. We forget that it's how well we need to know our customer and how well we need to understand where they're coming from. So traditionally, you may have, this really is the difference between standing on top of a mountain and shouting into the wind and kind of hoping somebody comes to your business, and being able to sit next to your best friend and tell them a funny joke, tell them something that you know that they want to hear, tell them something that makes a connection and creates an emotion. And that's really what you're trying to aim for in your marketing. Not only that, knowing your customer like a best friend makes marketing so much more easy. So when you understand exactly what they require, what they need, what they love, what they hate, what makes them laugh, what makes them cry, what's important to them, what their value systems are, then it's so much more easy to create content that you know they'll love. So it becomes much more like popping down to the pub and having a natter, saving up that story, thinking, oh, I know my friend will love that. I'm definitely going to tell them that. And you can begin to see how, in practical terms, on a day-to-day basis, you can see something in your business. You can think about parts of your business and think, I know my customer would love to see that, and quickly take a video of it or quickly take a photo. Creating content becomes less difficult when you're so confident about exactly who your customers are. Defining customers is difficult. So in the old days, we used to define customers by what Sunday paper they read, what kind of car they drove, which supermarket they went to. And in this day and age, it's much more difficult to do that because lots of people do lots of different things and have lots of different experiences. So you may have a clear idea of your mix of men and women. You may have a clear idea of age groups. But for most leisure industries and most leisure businesses and tourism businesses, often there is a variety. Sometimes you get couples, sometimes you get older customers who come in term time. You might get school-age kids in the holiday times, for example. You might always know that you get nature lovers. So defining your customers by experience is often the most useful way to do it. Thinking about what their shared needs are, desires, dreams. If you think back to the customer journey, we talked about the dreaming phase. what is the common thing that they all are looking for in some form or another, rather than defining them by traditional demographics. When you are thinking about defining your customers by experience, make a note of all the customers that you've already had in your business and think about the common things that they all mentioned or discussed. Oh, I love it here because it's always so peaceful and quiet. I love it here because I always feel so relaxed. I've really enjoyed my experience because we got to see so much wildlife. This is just perfect to visit because it keeps both my mum and my children happy. So immediately you can start to see what their shared needs and wants and desires are. But there's also something to think about in terms of what their problems are. It's sometimes difficult to imagine that people who are looking for a tourism experience have problems, but they do. It might be a problem of entertaining multi-generations of the family. It might be problems with cash flow, so they might need to find something that's cost effective. It might be problems with stress, so they need to find something that's going to help them switch off and really enjoy some time away from work. It might be that they have transport problems and need to be able to get to your place easily. And when you really dig deep into the problems or at least challenges that a customer has, it becomes so much more easy to market to them. There's a well-known phrase, sell the problems you solve, not the products you sell. And that couldn't be more true, because you imagine being able to create content and market to customers in such a way that they felt you understood them, that you'd already preempted and provided the solution to the problem maybe they didn't fully realize they had. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but about 70% of all leisure activities and tourism businesses are, or tourism activities are booked by women. And often women have a long list of things that they have to do in a day. They might work and they may have a caring role as well. And so sometimes the challenge can be as simple as they haven't got a lot of time and patience to plan and discover and book whatever it is they've been tasked with booking. And so this takes you again back to the different part of the customer journey, where you might be thinking about your planning and booking sections in your website, for example. How seamless is it? How frustrated will your potential customers get if those tiny little things that you think might not matter interfere with that process for them? And if they're already feeling a little bit stressed, a little bit under pressure, they need to achieve something quickly, then maybe this is at the point they decide they're going to move away and not book with you. So understanding and defining your audience by experience about what they need and what they don't need is so important. And I would write this down. Some businesses go as far as naming their customers, oh, she's Beryl. Beryl loves, wildlife, walking, bird watching and relaxation evening and a pint of real ale at a pub that she can walk to, for example. And once you start naming your customers like that, you start to really get to know and dig deep and think, no, Beryl wouldn't like that. Would Beryl like this? And so when clients or when businesses speak to me about feeling under pressure about the amount of content they've got to produce in their marketing, what am I going to say on social media, you can immediately understand that actually, would Beryl like this? Yes, she would. I'm going to take a photograph of it. Would Beryl appreciate this? Yes, she would. Then I'm going to video it and share it. So it just makes marketing so much more easy and practical. It's also important to think about defining different audience types. Most of us won't have one single audience. As I've already mentioned earlier on in this webinar, you might have an accommodation business where you have older couples who are semi-retired who come for walking breaks during term time, and then you might be quite family oriented in the summer holidays or the school holidays. And so you might have two quite distinct audiences, for example. Or you might have audience sectors that aren't really active in your business yet, but you'd like more of. So this could be an emerging market. It might be traditionally that you've always attracted retired people, and actually you'd like to have some younger customers who might like to try out new products and services that you've got on offer. Or it might be that you have lots of families with small children, but you'd like higher spending customers who stay a bit longer. Understanding what each sector of your audience does for your business is key here. So let's imagine that you have a core customer base. These are the people who will always likely book, the people who always like to come to your place, come to your events. You feel confident about who they are. Then you might have an emerging sector. So these are the customers you may see trends, or you might see a popularity in something, you think, I'd like some of that. So you've got self-catering accommodation, but you'd like to add some glamping in one of the fields, for example, because you feel that it would attract a younger market or a more adventurous market or a higher spending market. Then that emerging market needs to be catered for and thought about within your marketing plan. And you also might have a niche sector. So this might be a type of audience you won't get very often. You have self-catering and you do a few weddings a year. And maybe this niche audience is an audience that you don't necessarily want to increase in numbers, but you'd like to make sure you had enough of during the year because maybe they're particularly profitable, for example. So split your audience into those different sectors, because in later webinars, when we discuss things like Facebook advertising or more in-depth content management, you can start to define particular bits of content and marketing and define the exact customer who would like that bit of content. So again, you're much less shouting into the wind and much more whispering into the ear of a friend, if that makes sense. So once you have defined all your different audiences, as I've already mentioned, you need to understand what they mean to your business. So in old terms, you might call your core audience a cash cow. These are the people who bring in the bulk of your everyday turnover in your business. They always need taking care of. And these people will also become your advocates of the future. So you need to make sure that they are cared for, loved, taken care of. Your marketing always appeals to them. You know exactly who they are. You feel confident that they will come in higher volume and provide good turnover in your business. You might need to understand, if you're looking for increased footfall or you're looking for increase in profit, that you're only going to get that from your niche market, for example, or an emerging market. So how do you create different content and marketing opportunities to attract that kind of customer sector? And you can start to understand that if I want to grow my business by 20% in this particular year, then I have to focus in on some serious marketing to this particular emerging audience, for example. And then, of course, once all this definition has gone on, we've done a lot of that in this particular webinar, we need to then think about where these audiences are, where they are in the digital world and also in the real world and in life, actually. So let's start with the digital world. Whereabouts are they hanging out? Where are they socializing? Which platforms do they like? Which social media platforms do they like? What sort of device are they using? Are they likely to be on a desktop or laptop, or are they on mobile? Do they do everything with an iPad, for example? So understanding exactly where they're coming from is important. For those of you who've got established businesses, you might like to start with simple social media insights. or you might like to look at your Google Analytics. These things will be covered in later webinars, so don't panic if you're not quite sure how to use those things. But these bits of information are free for you to use and mean that you get good access to understand how your particular audience sector are hanging out in that digital world. Are they Facebook users? Are they Instagrammers? Do they get all their news from Twitter? Do they like to browse around a website? Do they like to watch videos on websites? Where do you get your audience from? And also, what devices they're using, and those sorts of things are so useful in your marketing. And knowing them and writing them down is also key. You also want to know where they are in the real world, so physically. You might think this is unimportant, really. You're just happy to have any of those kind of customers from wherever they come from. But when we look forward to other webinars and we talk about online advertising, social media advertising, for example, being able to target your message to your very specific audience is so important. So, do your customers tend to come from no more than an hour's drive away? Or do you tend to get customers that will travel up to 3 hours because they're staying for a longer amount of time? Do you get clusters of audiences? So do you have families that come from Scotland because their school holidays start earlier at certain types of the year? Do you tend to be very popular with customers from the southeast, for example? When you then think about the way that you market and the way that you target your marketing, it means that you can focus in your content to very specific geographical areas as well as interest areas. And then the final bit, that the section about where your audience is thinking about where they are in life. We've talked a lot about experience, we've talked a lot about feelings. Where they are in life is also important because it'll help you understand whether they're looking for peace and quiet, whether they're looking for their children to be entertained, whether budget is particularly important and smaller or larger, whether they feel they're at a time in their life where they deserve a bit of luxury and a bit of pampering, or maybe they need to be cheap and cheerful. Maybe they're young couples who aren't married yet and haven't got children, so want adventure, they want to discover something new, learn a new skill. All these different elements to your customer really bring in a lot more understanding so that you get a proper 3D view of what all those different types of audience want and desire. So understanding where they are in the digital, real, and in life is so important. The other thing that your understanding of the audience will also help you with is how they search. So in your marketing, you need to be aware of how people search on Google, for example, on their browser. As we mentioned in part 1 of Practical Marketing, not everybody will put in the specifics of what they're looking for. Quite often they will put in their feelings of what they're looking for. So how are they searching for the type of experience that you offer? Are they putting in romantic bolt hole for 2 rather than small cottage that sleeps 2? Are they putting in fun for all the generations rather than large group accommodation? People don't always know exactly what they want. They want the internet to provide the answers. We've become very used to the digital world providing the answers, whether we're translating language, doing some maths, watching a YouTube about how to fix a car. We expect the internet to provide all the answers, and it's very much the same in the tourism world. So don't think that people search for the very specific thing they're looking for. Remember that people search for the feeling that they're looking for. And so, again, understanding your audience within this context is so important. So as we head towards the end of this section of the webinar, it's important to just recap on where we've got to. We've talked about the customer journey throughout practical marketing, and we'll revisit again in part 3. We've also talked about defining what you sell and understanding the importance of experience over stuff. And we've also now talked about who your audience is, who your customers might be, understanding them and knowing them like a best friend, not shouting into the wind from the top of a hill. And also defining them by experience, needs, wants, desires, and challenges, rather than the traditional demographics, which may have some use. That's great. If you're a woman-only destination, for example, then that's absolutely fine. But understanding them by experience is important because it helps us understand not only the different parts of our audience and customer base and how they, how that translates to in our business world, but also it helps us understand how they search, what they're looking for, where they hang out in the digital world, where they are in the real world, more importantly, where they are in life, so that you, in all your marketing, can provide exactly the answers that they're looking for. So we can begin to see how the jigsaw comes together as part of marketing. So in conclusion then, remember to spend quality time with your friends, i.e. your customers. You need to invest your time. You need to listen to them as well as know them. You need to hear them, and you need to observe in the same way that you would with a friend. Listen to what they're saying and show them that you care, and put all your love and focus into that relationship with your customer. If you see your customer at the very center of all your marketing, you take care of them, you understand when problems occur, challenges appear, trends happen, things they want to try, and you're the first to listen, to hear, to hold their hand, to show them something new, then you can see that that relationship will become rich for your business. So thank you for listening to part 2 of this practical marketing for small business. Part 3 is coming up. Thank you.